Okay, so as this gets set up, um, I'm happy to back up here again. My name is Pramod Jain, and I can assure you that I'm a single child. Jain is the last name, which is a religion, and we are 1.2 million Jains around the world. So if you do come across another Jain, it's not my brother or sister. I do get quite a lot. I'm here for the last 2.5 years in Krakow, and I was here last year as well from a keynote perspective, sharing my thoughts on product management, the importance of product management. And today's discussion, or the talk that I'm going to be doing along with my colleague from Sabre, is around the transformation that Sabre is going through, especially in the area of product management. So in terms of the talk track, I will try to use airlines and Sabre as a case study. Even though you don't work in the field of airlines, that's not the domain, you will appreciate what we are trying to do because you do travel. And you have a shopping experience that you go through when you book a travel. And I'll talk about that in terms of why it's so important as we start the journey from a project to product mindset. My role as a vice president and general manager from a commercial planning portfolio of products is that I have different products, and they are in different maturity stage from a software lifecycle development standpoint. Some are in the harvest phase, some I need to sunset, some I need to keep growing, some I need to innovate. So there's a lot of conflicting priorities as a GM of the business that you need to take care of. You need to set your vision, you need to look at market dynamics, you need to set a 5 to 10 year roadmap, you need to take care of your customers which you have today, you want to grow the revenue, you want to improve the free cash flow. These are some of the examples or real examples in terms of what I deal with as a vice president of this area. But then underneath me, there are different GMs and directors who are managing their businesses as well. Then you got product managers underneath them supporting that as well. So you can see how the scale changes, but the job doesn't change because you're pretty much managing the business from a day-to-day perspective and from a long-term perspective. Sabre, even though I think most of the room have traveled once or twice in their life, probably more, Sabre is behind the scene, right? So you don't get to know about Sabre, but believe me or not, there are only 3 companies in the world that enable the travel when it comes down to making sure that your tickets are booked. You can go to your airline website, you can go to a travel agency, you go to a hotels, car rental. Sabre is behind the scene from that perspective. The origin of Sabre came from American Airlines. Sabre was the first reservation system in the world in 1960s when an IBM sales guy and American Airlines CEO, they got together on a plane, and that's how the world's first reservation system, called Sabre at the time, was created. And since then, of course, a variety of different systems have come across, but you can imagine the scale, the responsibility of a company like Sabre has to enable travel. I always talk about to explain what I do in a job to people who don't understand. And I have a conversation with my mom who was traveling here and visiting me here in Krakow a couple of months ago. She doesn't understand what I do, but she travels, right? And when I ask her a question to say, Mom, when you were flying, how did you book your special meal request? When you were flying, you saw that the plane was changing directions, there were certain coordinates that the captain took. How did that happen? How many seats need to be on the plane? What kinds of aircraft you need to fly? How many cabin crew needs to be on the plane? These are the problems that Sabre solves. These are the things that I get to solve, and this is what keeps me in this business and in this company for the last 12 to 13 years. So Sabre wired technology makes travel happen. That's how I describe the company. And a great industry to be in, very excited, very, I would say, privileged in terms of being part of this company and traveling around the world for the last 12, 13 years. So this talk today, what I'm going to talk about is this transformation that you see over here, project to product mindset. Why is it important for a company like Sabre, which was created back in 60s from a reservation system perspective, now going through a big transformation in terms of being a product company? Why does it matter? What do we need to go through that transformation? How are we going to do it? What kind of people do we need? What does product management really mean? These are the things that we want to talk about in the next hour and a hour, which you call as a Sabre session for us. So let's talk about travel industry. Like I said, I want to use travel industry as a use case for this context, for this conversation, because we all travel. We all travel, and travel was a very pleasant experience. When your parents traveled, it was like a joy. You book a travel, you sit on a plane, you get showered with different things. Now, it's a very different experience. It's a means to get to an end, but it is not as pleasant, or the experience is not as seamless as you compare that to other industries. So case in point, you go to Amazon, and Amazon remembers you, right? It remembers you from a customer perspective. It knows you pretty well as a customer. So they will say, well, last time you shopped for this, maybe I suggest you this option. So you don't have to go through all over again to start your shopping experience in this regard. Comes down to travel. I'm sure most of you book a ticket to come over here. You have to book your seat first, then you need to book your hotel. Then if you have to rent a car, that's separate shopping experience. You want to travel and see the city, that's a different experience. So it's all pieces of parts that needs to come together to give you the same experience which probably you got in different industry. And I'll talk about why is it so hard in an industry like this, but it's also a good opportunity for airlines to finally become retailers. Who is a good retailer? Amazon is a good retailer. A good retailer knows its customers. If you know your customer, then you can give the right offer at the right time at the right place. And that's what we want to try to get to in the travel industry sector. So the landscape of travel, the experiences, the demands from the consumers, from the customers are changing, and that's very important to know. Expectations are changing. I'll talk a little bit about NDC. People who are in this space, they understand what it means, but the reason I'm putting it over here is it's important because when you're going through a transformation, there always needs to be a catalyst for disruption. And NDC is one of that, and I'll explain what it is. Technology is what's going to transform. Technology, I think everybody appreciates technology. Gone are the days where IT was kind of more like, okay, the networking, the infrastructure, the hardware, the PC, and was a side job, even in manufacturing industries. IT is now at the forefront. Technology has taken a pivotal role in terms of transforming, and we are seeing the advancements in our space and other industries at a rapid speed. So changing landscape of travels, right? So I mentioned a couple of things about retailing. This is where we are trying to connect the dots. The experience I talked about, that airlines, it's a hard business. It's a very hard business for an airline to make money. There's a very famous joke that if you want to be a millionaire in this space, you need to start with $1 billion. The reason for that is that this is a hard industry, competitive industry. The margins are roughly around 4 to 5%. That's a good business, which means that if an airline is charging you $100, the airline is making $4 on that ticket. So you can imagine the cutthroat competition, and if the fuel price goes up, if the cost goes up, your margin further gets eroded, which is why you see a lot of bankruptcies that happens in the airline when there's a volatility in terms of the market dynamics. So very tough industry to be here in terms of operating. When the competition is strong, you're competing with either price or you're using your brand, your service, right? So this is where the retailing concept comes in. This is where technology comes in to say, well, customers want to spend money. The GDP is improving, the market is improving, we are in a very good state from an economy perspective. If the customers want to pay more, how can airlines make money? And then how can consumers or the customers who are flying those airlines can also get a better experience? So how do we create this win-win situation? And again, it starts with, can airline finally understand who Pramod is? When I am flying on a business travel, I have a very different need. I want to get to my destination in the quickest possible time. And I am not saying I don't care about the price, but it's one of the variables which I can trade off with. But when I'm going on a beach holiday or when I'm traveling on a leisure, my need is very different. I have time. I'm looking for cheapest possible fare. So how do you balance this? The same Pramod, but different persona, And airlines don't know that yet. And that's where, again, technology comes in. That's where, again, big data comes in terms of how do you really get to know the customer so the right offer can be created. So this is the landscape that's changing rapidly in our space. And I can bet you that the next 5 years, that all of us who are travelers, who are shoppers in this industry, will go through a very different experience because we are, and Sabre is at the forefront of that, solving this problem today. Technology, the expectation from technology has changed quite a bit because, like I said, the other industries have shown that technology can make a difference. Look at Amazon. They're entering into different verticals, even grocery stores. Ubers, Walmart. I mean, these are retailers who are really changing the way we think, and technology is what's driving it. So how do you apply the same technology back into this space for us? So I talked a lot about retailing, mobility. As a shopper, as a customer, you want to book your travel not just from your desktop, you want to book from every possible device that you got. How do you ensure that I have one click button on my handheld device and I click it and I get this end-to-end experience, which includes my seat, my hotel, my cars, the things I want to see that can happen. So complete mobility experience that is expected from a technology in this domain. Experimentation and machine learning. I would again say that other industries, especially healthcare, are doing I think they're much more ahead in terms of what they're doing with this. But think about some of the examples that this industry can take advantage of. If I can predict when the flight is going to get canceled, if I can predict when the flight is going to get delayed, that will help the airline because every time a flight is delayed or canceled, airlines take a lot of cost. Every time a flight is delayed or canceled, you, as a traveler, goes through experience which we all don't want. But if you can apply that machine learning, deep learning concepts, which is let's take historical data for the last 5 years of running that into a big data appliance and finding out those patterns where I'm causing those delays, why not to solve for that? I'm not talking about weather delays. I'm talking about delays that you can control. So you are happy as a traveler. Airlines are taking less cost, which means that you get better price as a consumer. So it's a win-win. Again, that's how you can apply technology to solve real examples that exist today, real problems that exist today. Cloud technology, very important from a speed to market perspective, total cost of ownership perspective. Sabre as a technology provider, we need to be on cloud. We have systems, I mentioned about 1960s, where we had this reservation system. It was important at that time for us to have TPF operating system in mainframes, because you're talking about huge transaction speed. The number of transactions per second, the TPS that we go through, is humongous, one of the largest that we have in the world. You need a system that can scale to that. You don't want lines at the airport. You don't want your shopping experience to be so slow that you can't book your ticket. So how do you ensure that you have a good combination of your open systems, your mainframe systems, but ultimately moving towards private cloud or public cloud? That's also very important. And last but not the least, the optimized employee management. When you go to a check-in counter, right? Some of you guys check in through website or your mobile device. Some of you still go through a gate agent or a person who checks you in when you're there to get your boarding pass. They spend a lot of time clicking to get you the boarding pass. How do we improve their experience? How do we give them this consumer-grade UX and UI so that they're not spending time to check you in, but in fact, they are having a conversation with you as a customer to say, where are you traveling? Here's your boarding pass, by the way. These are things that you can see. Try to sell you some of the ancillaries because you want an extra legroom seat or things like that. So it becomes a much more human interaction versus a machine transaction that the check-in agent does today at the airport. So how do you solve for that? So again, technology has a role to play in all of these aspects when we are trying to solve for the market trends in this space. I mentioned NDC. I'd like to show this as an example because NDC for us in the airline industry is a language or a communication protocol. That's how you communicate with other parties. So I'll leave at this highest level. But if you look at this picture, what it tells us that you as a shopper, When you go to a grocery store, when you go to a retailing place, you have options. You are looking and comparing. You're doing comparison shopping. You have full transparency in terms of, well, if I'm buying that particular olive oil, how many calories I'm going to get, what's inside it, what's the price point, I can compare with something else. Full transparency from a retailing perspective. Apply the same logic back to airline industry where you're buying a seat. All of you buy seats, right? You go to a website of airline, or you go to a travel agency, or you go to a meta search like kayak.com or skyscanner.com, and you do comparison. What you do? You look at price points. You don't have the fine details of, if I cancel my flight 5 days before my journey, how much charges I'm going to get. If I change my ticket, what's going to be the impact? You're buying at that time based on very limited options. And that's what we're trying to solve for. So NDC is a third-party initiative or a communication protocol that's come out there to say, how do we create this level of transparency in our space, which for the travelers like yourself, you will have options to look at to say, I don't like this, I don't like this, I don't like this, and I can choose. The same experience that you have in other industries. That's what we're trying to solve for. And the reason I'm giving you all this context is that this is very important for us from a Sabre perspective, and as we are trying to look for solving this project to product mindset, is that we have to change. We have to be very proactive versus being reactive to what's coming our way, because Sabre has a unique opportunity to ensure that we help the travelers, we help the airlines, and we make a difference in terms of how we look at the travel space. How do we solve that? The folks over here from a technology perspective will appreciate that this is a simple way to describe that this is how we're going to solve it. But that's not the answer. You don't want to make it complex as is today in terms of how we solve this. But just this illustrates you the number of touch points that we have, the number of systems that we talk to make things happen. So there must be a better way to solve for a problem like that. And that goes back to Legos. How many of you played Legos, or have your kids playing with Legos? The beauty about Legos is you can build whatever shape you want, different structures that you want, right? We are trying to of course, this is an oversimplification of it. The idea here is, if I'm trying to solve the problem back that I showed, rather than reinventing the wheel, how can I create these microservices? How can I create those services that I can use, which are self-contained modules across, so that I don't have this cobweb structure that I'm using to solve a particular problem? So that's one of the journey that we are taking, that we start to think about platform approach. We start to think of every possible product, every possible service as a Lego that we can leverage. So if another product of mine needs that service, it can just use it versus reinventing the wheel. And that's a big change. That's a big transformation from a technology perspective, which I'm sure the technologist over here can appreciate. Build once, deploy many times. That's very important as well from a platform perspective. As a GM of the business, you're always looking for ROIC. You're looking for how much return are you getting on your invested capital. You cannot scale if you are doing it again and again and again. You don't have a platform. So platform gives you the scale. Platform allows you to solve a problem in a way that it can be reused again and again, creating lots of upsell opportunities for you from a business perspective. This is just an example in terms of the things I was talking about, that how can I bring airline fare, how can I bring hotel, how can I bring things together to solve a problem, and it makes it very easy for a shopper as well to look at the fine blueprint that you don't see today to solve for it. Again, through platform approach, looking at Lego-based microservices approach that we're trying to solve for. Again, one of the examples that we are sharing over here is that underneath, we want to get over here is there's going to be a Sabre platform which will have tons of capabilities and service, different consumers that wants to take over these APIs, different touch points, different devices. How do you get to this holy grail to solve the problem? And I'm sure this problem is not unique just for Sabre, who's going through the transformation. This problem is unique for everyone who's in the software business, because we deal with integration issues, we deal with lots of custom issues, and how do you get to solve for that? And this is just a visual to guys to show you that we are working on it. The reason I'm showing Sabre over here is that the result coming out of this will impact you as a traveler in a good way. And it's not just Sabre, it's Sabre's competitors as well, trying to solve the problem that will make our life easier. Okay, so I talked about the context. Why is it important for Sabre to go through this journey? The next aspect of it is how do you do it? And this will apply to all of you who are thinking like a product company. The first thing I will explain is a project versus product. And that also explains what Rita was saying in terms of being a project manager, being a product manager. There are similarities, but there are lots and lots of differences. And that applies back to project versus product as well. Project is you have, let's say you sign a deal with one of the customers. That became a project. You need to cut them over. You need to make them go live with the scope that's identified in the contract. That's one project. Product becomes a combination of various projects that's around it. Product becomes when you're trying to scale, when you're trying to do things only one time and trying to diversify. So the key attributes that I want to list out first is, when you look at product company, the first thing they look at is investment by product with long-term view on value. The key word here is value. I had an intern come to me a couple of weeks ago, and he had a great idea. He built a good business case together. What he missed was, what's the value? Is there a market opportunity? If there is a market opportunity, how much it is? How are you going to price it? Is the competition there? How much are they pricing it? Ultimately, how much money I'm going to make and when. That's the most important thing when you start looking at investing in a product. You just don't create a product without doing that due diligence or push-ups. Value is the most important thing. I get to travel a lot. In 1 year, I clock around 300,000 miles, which is a lot of trips if you think about the miles that you spend around the earth. And I talk to chief commercial officers. I talk to CIOs. They have a very different perspective of what they want to buy, and their users have a very different perspective of how their product should look like. There are two different personas, a buyer persona and a user persona. A buyer is looking for value. CIO and CCO, the chief commercial officer, is to say, Pramod, how much money your product is going to make for me? Is it 10x in terms of how much I'm going to invest, or 15x? Same concept applies internally as well to your stakeholders when you go to them to say, hey, I want to invest in this product, in this particular feature, show me the value. So always think about the value, and I tell this to my developers as well. Don't code until your product manager has explained you the value. Very, very important question to ask. Everybody has a right to ask this question no matter what your job is. What's the value? Second one, fixed capacity with variable timeline and scope. A project has everything kind of fixed. You have a fixed scope, you have a fixed timeline, you have a fixed capacity. We deal in a world of constraints. We don't have infinite resources. So of course you have to have a fixed capacity. But the key punchline or punch word over here is variable, is that makes you nimble, that makes you agile. You are releasing your product based on how your market segmentation should look like, what your customer needs should look like, and your product or platform should allow you to create that variability in your timeline to deliver to the scope that you have agreed upon. Very, very important. You can come up with your any kind of release cadence that applies to you, 3 months, 2 weeks. Some companies do every 5 minutes release. There's no right or wrong answer to release a product internally or to externally, but having that flexibility is very important. Oftentimes, a company just can't release the product because of the legacy issues around it or not having the agility around it. But for a product company, it's very, very important. Optimize for scalability, extensibility, and reliability. 3 big words over here. When you create a product, again, not a project. Project has a product in it, yes, but that's just one customer or a set of couple of customers. You're looking for your entire market segmentation. So I'll give example of Sabre products. My products fit the needs of large airlines, small airlines, hybrid airlines. I want to make sure that I have this flexibility in my product that I can sell to all these 3 types of business models. And if I don't have the technology which will allow me to do that, I don't have I can't sell. I can't sell to one of the largest airlines like American Airlines of the world because the scale will kill me. And that's what I'm talking about over here is when you look at your product and your market segmentation is very clear, your customer segmentation is very clear, then you need to solve for scalability. It has to scale up and down. It needs to be extensible, and it has to be reliable. A customer needs to trust your product because when you're giving a value to the customer to say, you're going to make 10 times the money on this product, it needs to work. It needs to be reliable. I can trust the system to give me the right data and the right output. Number 4, standardized products. I think that's the key word over here. A lot of companies, when they start small, and it's not a wrong thing to do, you have 3 or 4 customers. And then you do everything possible, especially when they're big ones, to do everything possible to make them happy, make them reference customers, because that's your bread and butter. You can't survive without them. But as the company goes through stages of a small startup to becoming a medium-sized company and a large company, you always have to remember the big picture. You always have to think about how can I have a standardized product? Very difficult to do, very easy to say, right? And that's where technology comes into the foreplace in terms of how do you make sure that you have configurability enough that you can cater to the business models. That's very important. We have a lot of custom issues as well. Like in my portfolio, I can speak that there are some airlines who have used the product in a way that other airlines don't. You can solve for that by a very customized release schedule or a product for them, or you can do a configurability on the other side. But you need to have that flexibility in your product. Ultimately, scale is going to come from community product, a product that can work for 90 airlines in the world, different shapes and sizes. 5th is standard and best practices driven efficiency. So when you are a product company, you're always looking for best practices, which means that it could be internal best practices. Somebody is doing great things in their area. How do you make sure you take the best practice out, apply, so you're not doing, again, reinventing the wheel in every area. Consistency is so important in a product company. No matter how good you do in your localized space, in your domain, but if you can't scale and if you can't apply the logic or the standards across the board, you're going to have lots of issues. And inconsistency is a recipe for disaster, no matter how good or bad it is. So standard and best practices, learning from the best, internal as well as external, is so important. And that's part of the reason Aditya and I connected from a PDD perspective as well, is that Sabre is going through a journey of product management transformation. Lalita is going to talk about it in a few minutes. But that's also internal. We are trying to, of course, leverage different external parties as well. But how can we learn from you guys? How can we learn from external partners to become better? And best practices does not have to come from within the building. It can come from anywhere as long as you adopt it and then you standardize it and make sure everybody uses it. That's very important. Last but not least, 6th attribute is focus on talent development. Now, everybody talks about talent acquisition. The HR teams love to call them as talent acquisition teams. But what is talent, right? Talent is, okay, you want to recruit the best possible candidates. To solve for what? And that goes back to your strategy. Is your product so deep into subject matter expertise that you want to hire the best possible subject matter experts? Or is your product best in class, but needs somebody who is a product marketer who can do best go-to-market strategy for you, who can really help to solve a product transformation for you? So it all depends on what are you trying to solve for. Once you have that clarity, then the talent comes into the play. And then you have to nurture the talent by investing internally as well as getting people from outside. So I will talk a little bit about what does that talent looks like in the role of product manager. It is a heroic role. And this is not to give any disrespect in terms of other roles that are there, but this role is de facto CEO of the product. But you don't have all the leadership rights and the ownership. You don't have that much empowerment. It is a leadership by influence role, and this makes this role very difficult, but also great in terms of the value add that the role can do. So the first attribute and these are soft skills, no in particular order. is observer. Lalita will talk about it, how important it is to get to know your market. Notice, I'm not saying customers, I'm saying market. The first thing is know your market. Where are you going to play? And a market is a set of customers based on the segmentation that you have done. You got to observe, evaluate market. Remember the trends that I showed you in the travel industry landscape? If we in Sabre are not watching for the landscape changes that are happening 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, then we are not thinking long term. We are solving for short term, and the company is not going to be thinking long term and be there in that 10 years horizon, right? So it's very important to know what's happening in the market, get a pulse of the market, get to know the market dynamics and trends. And a product manager has a key role for that. And the market, customers, trends, and then come back and educate the teams, start building a roadmap based on that. Observer, listen. Listening is a very important attribute of a product manager. Driver. Product manager drives action. No one pushes the team harder to get meaningful work done. Oftentimes, the role of product manager, people don't get to see the challenges the product manager, he or she, goes through. The reason the person has to drive goes back to the chief executive officer role that a product manager plays, where you are solving for the short-term needs, you're also solving for long-term needs, you have different priorities that you have to manage, and the product manager needs to drive that. It's very, very important that you need to be a driver. Fighter. Product manager fights for the product market share, dollars, and strategy. When you have a large portfolio of products, and you are the product manager for one of those, you are competing. You are competing for dollars to invest. You are presenting your case. It's like going to a venture capitalist and saying, hey, invest in my product. I'm going to return back to you in 3 years with this much return back. But that's the business case the product manager has to think about to sell the idea, to get the dollars back, invest in the product. So it's very important that the product manager has those fighting abilities for the market share, for the internal share, for the dollars, and also look out for the strategy. Aligner. I mentioned leadership by influence, alignment. I don't know how many of you understand the word alignment. It's oftenly very loosely used. You say, we are aligned. But what does alignment mean? Which means that if you're in a room having those tough conversations, it's okay to disagree in those conversations. Give your viewpoint, because that's how a best decision is made. But once you walk out of the room and you say, I'm aligned, then you are fully supporting that decision. You're not saying, well, I don't agree with that anymore. It doesn't make sense anymore. Then you're not aligned. And this is where product manager, the leadership by influence, becomes so important, because he or she is shepherding so many different roles: a developer, a QA, a scrum master, a product marketer, salesperson. There's so many different stakeholders that are involved in the process, and this person is making sure that all of them understand and they're aligning towards it. So very, very important attribute. Accountant. People who work for me, they know how big I am on financials. For me, numbers tell the story. I can look at the P&L, and I can look at the balance sheet, and I can tell you where the problem is. And that's something that it's very important, because if you look for key things like NPV, if NPV is negative, I shouldn't be investing in the product no matter how good the idea is. If the ROIC sucks, I shouldn't be looking at it. There are other things that I can invest my money on. If my maintenance cost is high, that means my revenue is coming, okay, my top line is growing, but my margin sucks, my free cash flow is bad. That means I need to go and solve for the platform. I need to solve for that customization that I'm doing. Why am I spending maintenance dollars every year? It's increasing year over year. There's a problem, and numbers can tell you that. So accountancy, knowing commercial skills, knowing financial skills is very, very important attribute for a product manager. You've got to know how to read a P&L. You've got to know how to run a balance sheet, and then make decisions based on that. Because oftentimes, you will see where the problem is just by looking at the numbers. And then you can go under the hood and find out where the problems are. Butcher. It's a hard one, but like I said, we live in a world of constraints. You have to make hard choices. Your spreadsheet has so many great ideas. You always talk about what's above the line, what's below the line, based on the dollars that you get. Somebody will not be happy. You have to probably let the teams go in different product, not your product. You have to probably piss off some of the customers. because they didn't get what you promised when you stood up last year. So this is a role that you need to be comfortable making hard decisions. This is where leadership comes in. This is where the overcoming your self-doubt comes in. How important it is to make those hard calls. So butcher is probably a harsh word to say, but it is. We do that every day in terms of making those priority calls. It's a prioritization effort. Strategist. I can't understress this, how important it is. If you know your market, if you know what market is going from a 5 to 7 year perspective, you need to know and how to convert that back into a strategy. Nothing should be coded. A product should not be created without having a strategy. Otherwise, you're creating a project. And if you create a project, you'll be successful in short term, 2, 3 years, 3 years, where your top line is probably growing, your margins are bad, you're waiting for somebody to buy you, or you will basically get bankrupt over the years. But not having a strategy, not having the goals, and having people not understand is a recipe for disaster. Fixer. So if you have a strategy, you need to change strategy oftentimes, right? You need to change to market dynamics. You need to change to everyday competing priorities. I'm not saying change the overall strategy. That should be refreshed every year or every 2 years. But underneath that, there are roadmaps. Underneath there are releases that need to go out. And you need to make sure that you're fine-tuning it based on data and, of course, your intuition. Profit. You got to see the future. There's no like easy way to say, okay, you know what, I can tell you in the next 5 years or 7 years, this is how the future will look like. But a product manager has to decide based on data, based on intuition. And intuition comes with experience. It comes with making those hard calls, because when you're failing, you're learning, and your intuition gets better and better in terms of finding those, or making those bets, making those assumption calls that you're putting in your business case. So that's a very, very important. Firefighter, I think this is the last one on this, is there are fires every day. There are fires every day when you wake up in the morning, especially when you're working in a global workforce. You get emails overnight, and then you have to solve for that. And how do you ensure that you're okay with that, you're comfortable with that, you're not like, oh God, what do I do now? It's a very, very important skill, because prioritization, putting out fire, again, keeping the big picture in mind, which is your business case, your strategy, your stakeholders. You've got to have this pyramid that you define and your matrix to make those priority calls. Fires will be there, and you don't need to be scared of those fires. You just need to have a plan to fix those fires. So before I hand over this to Lalita to talk about what Sabre especially is doing from a product management transformation, a couple more thoughts on this. So I listed out why is it important for Sabre to do the transformation, because industry is changing. Either we do it, or someone else will come, like Google or Amazon will come in this space and they'll do it. That's first, survival and looking at the future. Second, it is an opportunity that impacts all of us. We are travelers. We book tickets every day. We fly. Our experiences are not good as compared to other industries. How we can make that better? Sabre has the opportunity. So transformation is the key, and we're going to go through that. It's going to be a multi-year transformation. Second aspect of that is, what is a product company, right? It's very important to simplify the role or the understanding of a product company and a project company. Like I mentioned, product is something that's a platform for you to upsell, diversify, go to different verticals if needed to be, provided you have a standardized product, provided that you have not done those customizations. And if you have done that, if you have written those stored procedures for the customer, how do you bring it back into your core repository and start thinking about long term? That's very, very important. The last piece is the importance of product management, which Lalita will go into detail much more, is that some of the attributes that I've said, I'm not saying you've got to have all these attributes. I'm not saying that. I'm just trying to make you understand and appreciate that all of these, in some way or the other, is required for a product manager to be called as the CEO, to justify the role of the CEO of the product. The last thing I would say is that, for me, this has been a 2.5-year journey in Poland. My charter of coming over here to Krakow was to start the product management team, to start the product marketing team. And in all fairness, in all transparency, I would say that the momentum has been slow. And being here in these events helped me to connect with all of you guys, is because we're trying to look for people who are good internally, who are very strong product owners. They are very strong technical minded. so definitely can fit one of the roles. But like I mentioned in the attributes, commercial skills. Why do I need to solve for a problem? Before writing a code, I need to know what value I'm going to add. Those skills are required. And this is going to take transformation as well. We're going to bring people from US back here in Krakow. I want to go and travel and visit universities. The tech schools should be teaching more business classes as well, again, about the value. Something that needs a lot of work. And I'm excited here from the event perspective is to share the thoughts what Sabre is doing, but also get to network. And again, it's not a recruiting pitch, but we are growing the product management. I think it's very important. The mindset is changing from a CE perspective, is that Krakow or Poland or European countries, Eastern European countries are no longer an answer to the cost. That's how it started. We started 18 years ago here in Krakow with 13 people. And now we are close to 1,600 people. And it's not just based on the cost. It's also about ownership. It's also about having people owning the product end to end. So if I have a product manager here in Krakow, if I have a technical product manager here in Krakow, I got a developer, Scrum Master, they own that feature, they own the product, and you solve for a lot of things that I've talked about from a problem perspective. So again, the journey isn't over yet. I think we're going to make a lot of transformation. Do need to hire one of the best teams here in Krakow from a Sabre perspective. Let's share thoughts later in the break time frame, and I'll invite Lalita, who is my colleague. She has specifically made a trip from US to be here and, of course, network with all of you guys, but also share what product management means, not just here in Krakow, which I am heading, but from a broader Sabre perspective. Why is it important, and what are we doing from a framework perspective? So, Lalita, please welcome.
Thank you, Pramod. Appreciate that. So I thought I'd spend a few minutes, let me just reset, there we go. I thought I'd spend a few minutes going a little bit deeper on the who aspect of product management, and specifically talk about what we've been doing at Sabre, where we are, some of the lessons learned, and then maybe give you some inspiration into the role and how we're looking at it as well. But let me take you back. When you were a kid, or if there are parents in the room and have small children, I can almost guarantee that many of them, as they think about growing up and thinking about what they want to be when they grow up, some of these come to mind. They want to stand up, they want to be a doctor, they want to be a teacher, they want to be an athlete. And I started thinking about why. I think that's very relatable roles as we think about children and what they see in their environment. They understand the role, they understand the value of the role, and they start to dream about wanting to be in that role because they come with a certain set of talents and innate skills themselves. But what makes it different is that we don't know what a product manager looks like at that age. We don't know what the value is or what the role is. And so in that space, I was getting a little curious. I went to the internet, the trusted internet, to just start Googling a little bit and understanding, where did this start? Where was the history of this? This was just one example. I'm sure there's other theories or other stories, but this was an interesting one for me to start piecing the puzzle together. Back in the 1930s, Procter & Gamble, big consumer packaged goods company, thought of a role that they needed in their organization that owned the product, that owned the brand, and they talked about that as brand men. They understood that there was somebody that needed to own the product from an advertising, promotion, and perspective. And so that's where that initially had started. A few years later, many years later, I guess, Mr. Hewlett, Mr. Packard came to the table. They liked that idea. But they said, you know what? They need somebody that's a product owner that actually understands the customer a little bit better, who's the decision maker for how to shape the product and how to move it going forward. And so they wanted to connect the customer voice to the product owner as well. We go across the globe. Toyota, in their manufacturing organizations, they're thinking about evolution. They're thinking about innovation. Okay, another example of product and how they have to continuously evolve through the life cycle and innovate along the way and drive efficiencies. And then we start introducing that notion of product management into the technology workspace. It started in the early days with a little bit of more marketing communications and a product manager really thinking about the 4 Ps of marketing: product, place, price, promotion. And it became more of a marketing in nature. And then we started introducing Agile. And then there became a distinct need and a distinct relationship between a product manager and their engineering counterpart, each with a distinct set of values and competencies for the organization. So it became pretty clear, and why it was not even surprising at Sabre, why our product management organization grew from somewhat pieces and parts as well. Our organization, Pramod shared a little bit of the history, but we grew from the airline industry. So we have people, or had people in product management roles who were deep subject matter experts, domain experts, if you will. We have people in product management role who came from finance. So they could understand the P&L, they could understand the commercials, but that was just one piece. We had people that came from technology. So maybe they were the first person that wrote that first line of code in a revenue optimization solution or a crew management solution that we solve today. Again, one piece of that. But they were called product managers, and they were expected to do the role that Pramod started describing earlier on. So we decided that there was a clear need in our organization to drive that clarity. What do we want product management to look like at Sabre? And we embarked on this journey. The journey actually took us back, 5, 6, 7 years now, and I think we've had starts and stops over the course of the years. But in terms of best practices, we went out to the market and we said, what does that look like for a B2B company? What does product management and product marketing look like? Some of you may have heard, but we've heard of pragmatic marketing, and it's a very well-known framework in this B2B space in terms of helping define or giving us a blueprint and insights into the breadth and depth of a product management company in a product management role. We took the framework, which starts on the left-hand side, everything that the product manager has to look at from a strategic perspective, from the outside in, all the way to the right-hand side from a go-to-market perspective. So think about the execution. Where we noticed that our business was focusing on was firefighting on the execution part. We weren't able to take a step back and really understand the market and really understand the strategy to be able to drive that across profitably for the business. We then took a step and said, where are we good? Where are opportunities and where are gaps? We literally went box by box. I could still remember the day that we sat and went box by box to identify what is it that this means in this role, where are we good at it in the company, and where do we have gaps that we can solve for. Clearly you can't solve for, 30 plus boxes and expect every person to be able to do everything. That's not the case. This framework is probably just divided into probably 3 or 4 key roles that I'll talk about in a minute. But we wanted to figure out what areas does Sabre need that we could move the dial on what product management looks like and how we could begin to drive that kind of practice across the business. And I've highlighted a few areas here. So first and foremost, market problems. I think that was one of the biggest takeaways we had in a company, is that we tended to start being order takers first. The customer came, they screamed, they said, we want XYZ features, we went and built it. We didn't think about, did it make sense for another customer? Does it make sense for us in terms of where I'm spending our money? So we had a very, very good focus on market problems and understanding the problem we're solving for in the market and how can that help a broader community, market problems. We then translated that into business plans. Having that concrete and consistency and to be able to translating and defending your investment dollars with clear business plans and ROI was a necessary form of what product management had to do. And that took a little bit of skill set difference as well. We talked about personas. I think Pramod touched upon that as well. We needed to be very clear that our product served a few people. There was a buyer, and then there was a user. And the breadth of the Sabre portfolio, the breadth and depth that we cover the airline travel space and the customer journey from planning all the way to the day of travel, you can only imagine the types of people that we had to categorize and group, right? Chief commercial officers, CIOs, for example, making the buying decisions, but the user persona, their day-to-day analysts, what do they need as they're thinking about their job to make them successful? We needed to understand that to be able to drive value in our product. Roadmaps, wow, I can't tell you the amount of work that went into kind of looking at the discipline of road mapping, and I think there's a session later today as well, so I'm going to be curious about Pete's session on roadmaps. But roadmaps was an interesting one when we think about if we had clear market problems, we're then able to then plan the next 6 quarters clearly, be able to communicate that effectively, being able to arm our team internally to sell. That's what we're here for. We're in a business to do that. And so we needed to have an asset that was consistent across our portfolio. Pricing is another example I'll touch upon because Pramod talked about the role of value or the term of value. When we looked at our list pricing and thought about that, we were very cost plus, I think, was our, what is it going to take? Let's add a couple of pennies on top of that, and then let's call it a day. I think when we started understanding the value we were bringing to the market, because we understood the market problem, we were able then to capture some of that in the way we went to market with our pricing strategies. And we had to really rethink that. That's all part and parcel of the competency and the skill sets. So a few examples for you in terms of what we had started probably 4 or 5 years ago. And then what I'll share is a little bit of some of the lessons learned. I think any transformation, first of all, takes time. Any transformation is a mindset shift that needs to take the culture of the organization to cross with you. And so with that, you'll come up with some successes and then some lessons learned. I think I talked about the clear market problems. The other thing we drove was P&L rigor. So I'll go back to the financial aspects of that. You have to be able to talk to your numbers and to be able to have forms to do that on a daily basis. It's not just an afterthought or not just a quarter close kind of conversation or activity. It has to be part of your operational cadence, and we were able to do that and drive that. Other examples that we touched upon was customer-facing roadmaps, being able to talk and have an opportunity to have a customer conversation and showcase value of the product. And then customer engagement, the way we showed up even to the customer, we were able to more confidently talk about our product, our market strategy, why they should care, and why they should be part of the journey with us if they wanted to remain competitive. Some of the successes. Some of the downfalls that and I'm sure it's any big organization or even, I guess maybe size doesn't matter from an organization, but structure and design is where we're still, I think, not able to sustain and be scalable. If we want to keep this kind of rigor and discipline in place, you have to be structured and have people accountable to drive some of this discipline. And so that's we're still working on there. And more recently, while we were talking about some of these examples within our specific area of Sabre, which is one of the business units, we're more recently seeing some of that inconsistency across Sabre. But the opportunity for us is to try to drive that holistically across. And that's kind of the point we're at right now, very exciting as well. So we're able to better invest, better scale, and better serve our customers. I think the other point here I'll make is the dynamic nature of our industry. So when you talk about roadmaps, it's not just a concrete asset that we can just write once, it's solid, it doesn't change, we execute, we move on. That's kind of boring, right? So our industry being so dynamic, we have to be able to catch the changes, understand how to prioritize, making sure we're making the right calls, placing the right bets on the roadmap, but that takes that kind of skill set in this competency. So just a few insights in terms of the reality of what this looks like in a business of our size and the complexity of our portfolio. One of the recent wins that I think we did have is going back to the who and the role is putting pen to paper and really being clear of what the role of product management is for us at Sabre. So we talked about this notion of being a CEO of the business, and we also now talk about it as the intersection of customer, of product, and of technology. I think that's a clearly distinctive competency. It's recognized, it's valued. We're talking about it more, and we want to invest in that skill set going forward. And so this is just an example of how we're looking at it and a blueprint of that. Behind this as well, we've also developed a list of a dozen competencies that we will look for in terms of the types of leaders that will help us influence this specific skill set at Sabre. As beyond that, as we think about our product practice, so we talk about singularly the notion of a product manager, but I think it's equally important to identify that the holistic product practice we defined within 3 roles. So we said there are people in our organization that are truly the product managers. There are the technical product managers, and then there's the product marketing managers. So you'll hear people say PMs, TPMs, PMMs. That's the letters that are getting, alphabet soup that's getting thrown around. But we think about that for Sabre in our portfolio. Those are the kind of the 3 roles. That doesn't mean that they don't interact with some of the other key functions that make that product practice successful. You need to tie to the strategy, and the strategy of the business and the strategy of your product. You need to have your financial partners, your HR partners, your marketing partners, your operations partners. It takes an ecosystem to drive a product practice, but we needed to drive clarity with some key roles right now, because we're setting expectations for individuals within our organizations, but labeling them with very different names and then not being able to let them be successful. So I think this was an important lesson learned for us to put that pen to paper and showcase what it is in clear fashion. So now I think we're at a juncture where maybe we start to recognize what a product manager is. We can put some names and faces to them. We can see what they may look like and shapes and sizes of them for the various parts of the business, which is exciting. And I think if I take you back to the analogy with being a kid and being able to dream of what you're going to grow up to be, I think it's pretty clear now that product manager mindset, and I think Pramod alluded to with some of those competencies and characteristics as well, is that you can be an astronaut, because you have to look into space and innovate a little bit and think about what's happening in the future. You can be an athlete. You are constantly juggling the demands of the business, the demands of the customer, and the demands of your teams. You can be a scientist because you are developing the right product, and you're developing for value and for the right reasons. You can be a detective. You're constantly keeping an eye on the market, and you're not losing sight of that, because that's what you're driving your product towards, is to deliver value for the market. And you can be a doctor. You can be a doctor in your own sense, because you're writing the business case, you're writing the prescription for what that investment is going to be. So I wanted to kind of highlight in a very simple way, how you start thinking about, I wouldn't call it the best of the professions, but a little bit of each of the professions, and how that starts to form an image in your mind about what a product manager could look like. And so I guess the light takeaway is that helpfully with this, you can kind of explain to the next generation of kids, or if you're parents in the room, to your own kids now, that there is a dream, that you can grow up to be a product manager, and you know what it looks like. I hope this was helpful. I just wanted to give you a little bit of insight of what we're doing at Sabre and make it a little bit simple to consume. So I'll invite Pramod to the stage if we want to take a few minutes for questions.
All right.
Hello, I'm Romuald. I have a question regarding one of the slides. You referred that the product management influences the technology. Isn't it vice versa, that the technology sets the frames where the product management can act?
I think classic question that I get from my developer and architect, to say, we have this fancy looking technology that can solve this particular problem. And I go back as a product manager to say, can I make money from here? What is the market opportunity? What is the market analysis? So it's a combination of a technology and product management, because ultimately you are in the business to solve for something, and you got to know what are you trying to solve for. Technology is a means to an end in that respect.
Yeah, another way I'll put it is, we talk about that is the product manager brings the what to the table in terms of what we're trying to build and why. The technology leader then talks about the how, and we give the accountability to how you want to build it once you understand that knowledge.
Hey, my name is Sebastian. I have two questions. One is, let's say, personal question, and the other is, let's say, more generic. So when it comes to the generic question first, how to be a product manager in a project or product, let's say, which is hard to monetize. For example, trip case is probably a good example for Sabre. And the other is personal, how good you are in being a batcher. So let's say, taking a 1 year time span, how many products did you sunset?
I hope you don't work for Sabre. Okay, so the question one, let's talk about the products which you can't monetize. But value doesn't mean just dollars. Value also means what value it adds to the entire portfolio. So in a portfolio, you will have 5 products which are sitting as your cash cow, that you're milking them as much as possible, that gives you the cash to to put money into other products which are still in a very infancy stage. You have to invest more and more to get money afterwards. So it depends on where your product sits in terms of the overall framework from a software perspective. But then if your product will never make money, but there's a value added in terms of the brand. So if Tripcase is the one that's the only product that talks to the customers, and it's a B2C product, what does that C does to you from an entire product portfolio perspective? So there's a quantification of the value in terms of dollars, but there's also quantification of the value in terms of market share, more branding, more knowledge of what Sabre is doing to get more customers back into your house. So the numbers is one aspect to it. But yes, I think the value, what I'm trying to tell you is that the value just can't be just numbers. It has a lot of other factors around it as well. When it comes to Butcher, 1 year, I would say, I think in my portfolio, we have a bunch of products where we had to make some hard calls. And we had to make hard calls, not that they were doing a bad job in terms of margins. Some of the businesses that I have, or products that I have, are 55% margins, roughly. And they're not bad from an EBITDA perspective. But they don't fit into my core strategy. So when I start looking for investment dollars, when I'm competing with other VPs who are competing further ahead, I have to be very smart about where I'm going to put money on. And it's not just a margin question. It's about, is it core to my strategy? Or is this product going to grow by X percentage in 5 years? I think those are the questions that I field. And that decides me to say, you know what, I'm going to milk it as much as possible. And I know that at some point I will lose customers here. But that's a conscious decision based on the data.
What is the ultimate number?
I won't share the numbers, but there are a couple of products in this area that follows this particular life cycle. Yeah. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, no, I just say, I think that's a hard thing to do. I think sunsetting is a hard thing to do, and we've seen that in our portfolio. Some people, we get emotionally attached to products, but it's not about that. It's about what the value is in the market. I think we have a job to do to still do better at sunsetting. I think the nature of our portfolio, because it's multi-year investments, multi-year implementations, it's not easy to just pull a plug and switch something off. So it takes time to kind of get through that. But we need to do better as a business to consciously make those decisions with the right framework and rationale in mind and start getting customers on the right path. Because the sooner we can do that, we can reinvest those dollars back into the innovation cycle, right? But that is a very critical thing that we need to continue to do.
Yeah, I think it's a hard one as well. So it's easy for me to say where I have, let's say, 25 products, and I can put them into the spectra. But the product manager itself, like Lalita was saying, is emotionally tied to that product. To become a butcher and kill that and move something else is not an easy thing to do. I agree. More questions? How much time do we have? Done? Okay, I think time is up. So thanks very much for having us, and I hope that this was helpful. Thank you.